Yeah, for bread bread of heaven, feed me till I want no more bread. Your neighbor by the hand, look him or her in the eye. Declare with me these words. Say, neighbor. Neighbor. Come on, say it like you mean it. Say, neighbor. Neighbor. Pastor's going to preach about the thrill is gone. Find your another neighbor on the other side. Say to that neighbor, say, neighbor, my pastor is going to preach about the thrill is gone. I need your prayers. The thrill is gone. Such is the title of the lyrics of the blues singer B.B. King. The title he has for us this morning is The Thrill is Gone. My brothers and sisters, I don't know what your thrill is, but your thrill then is indicative of whatever that thing is that makes you smile on your face. The thrill is the thing that whatever it is that makes you happy when all things around you are sad. The thrill is whatever you have it to be in your life is that thing that keeps pushing you to the next level. But my brothers and sisters, I stopped by on my way to heaven's table to declare to you that while the title of B.B. King's The Thrill is Gone is catchy, rather is still convicting. Rather is definitive, is still dangerous. Even though it may be exact, I want to tell you the thrill being gone is expensive. Why? Because no, B.B. King is not talking about the thrill that the believer knows about. He's talking about some thrill, rather, beloved, that has to do with earthly transmission. I'm talking about Jesus himself. Are y'all in here with me? Because again, these words are the words of the struggle that the church at Ephesus had. They had now lost their first love. My brothers and my sisters, I stopped by to tell you, I don't know who it is I'm talking to, but it's dangerous, beloved, to lose your first love. I know some of you in here believe without a shadow of a doubt your first love is that boy that you liked in high school, or that girl you found good looking in college, or even the wife you married, the children you bore, the husband that now takes the place as lead. But I stopped by to tell you, your first love is not any of those persons, but your first love is Jesus. Are y'all in here with me? Why? Because I first loved Jesus because he first loved me. And that's why, beloved, I can tell God thank you that even though the title, The Thrill is Gone, is an earthly title, it still bears some spiritual significance. Because if I ever was to lose my thrill as it relates to Jesus, then in hell, I'm going to lift up my eyes. And so it is today, such is the writing of John the Revelator as he now sits on the isle called Patmos. He comes to encourage the believer today, don't lose your thrill. Do I have any help in here? He said, because if you lose your thrill, you lose your power. If you lose your thrill, you lose your protection. If you lose your thrill, you lose your presentation. He simply says to the believer, if you lose your thrill, you lose your Savior. And I don't know who I'm talking to today. I don't know where you're sitting, but I thank God I know Jesus. Is there anybody in the Friendship Church today that want to tell God, thank you, I know you, and not only do I know you, but you surely know me. Are y'all in here with me? And so it is, John begins to write. He begins to put pen to parchment to write to the 7 churches of Asia Minor. Over the next 7 weeks, we'll visit these 7 churches over 7 Sundays with 7 sermons, with 7 messages to the church and 101 Friendship Street that declares that we got to have Jesus on our side. Do I have any help here? The question is, Pastor, then why do I need Jesus? I need Jesus because I need somebody to hold my hand. I need Jesus because I need somebody to guide my feet. I need Jesus because I need somebody to tell me that when the wind begins to blow, everything will be all right. Let me see if I can survey the church. Is there anybody on my right that will testify on the 4th Sunday in October, you need the Lord? But see, y'all ain't caught on yet. Anybody on my left that know God has been good to you, and without a shadow of a doubt, you're not going to lose your thrill because you need the Lord. Do I have a witness in here? So it is. John begins to write. He writes now to these 7 churches. He writes to the church at Ephesus. He writes to the church at Laodicea. He writes to the church at Smyrna. He writes to the church at Pergamum. He writes to the church at Thyatira. He writes to the church at Sardis. He writes to the church at Philadelphia. And those of you who are in Bible class over the last several weeks, you understand. He writes telling them that they that have an ear, let them hear what the Spirit is saying to the church. Do I have a witness in here? Well, the first church I want to lift today is indeed the church of Ephesus. The question is asked, what is he saying to the church at Ephesus? He said, if you got to hear, hear what the Spirit says to the church. Well, here it is, beloved. He writes these letters. First of all, he writes prophetically because he understands that the churches over 2,000 years can rest in the church at Ephesus. Because there's somebody in here today that will agree with me that, yeah, Pastor Dave, I've lost my first love. That there's somebody here today that will agree with me that, yeah, I hadn't always had the Lord Jesus on my side. But I thank God that even when I lost my first love, he didn't stop loving me. Is there 5 of y'all in here who ain't scared to tell God, thank you, that even when I lost him, he didn't lose me? Is there anybody here telling God, thank you, that even when I walked away from him, he kept right up behind me? Why? Because he knows me as his child. To have me help here. Not only were these letters written prophetically, but these letters were written practically because he wants the church to know that these letters are not just information for the churches at Asia Minor. But he says these letters, beloved, is information to the church at 101 Friendship Street. What he's saying? Well, he's saying to tell the children of the Most High King, don't lose your first love. Do I have any help in here? Because if you lose me, then guess what? You'll die and go to hell. But I thank God this morning that whenever I come to the point and I recognize who God is, when I recognize what God is able to do for me, I can't help but to lift up my head and tell God, thank you. I wish I had somebody in here that would help me tell God, thank you, because you know God is still worthy. Anybody know he's still worthy? On your bed of affliction, he's still worthy. With no money in the bank, he's still worthy. When family and friends walk off and leave you, he's still worthy. When church members and pastors don't understand, he's still worthy. Regardless of what you got going on, don't lose your first love. Do I have a witness in here? He's worthy, and so it is. John writes. He writes to the church. He writes us a word. First of all, about the Lord's complaint. He writes a word, second of all, about the Lord's command. But then he writes a word, Sister Fanny, third of all, about the Lord's caution. Well, let me see if I can pull this text today. Look, first of all, when I look at the Lord's complaint, look what he says in verse number 4. He says, nevertheless, he says, I have somewhat against thee. What do you got against me, Jesus? He said, because thou hast, watch this, left thy first love. Do I have any help here? The text says in verse number 4, nevertheless, which gives indication that they've done something right, but they've also done some things wrong. Let me see if I can drop my kickstand right there and tell somebody, I don't care what you do right in the eyes of people, if it's not right in the eyes of God, it's still wrong. Do I have a witness in here? How do you know? Because the text says in verse number 2, I know thy works. Look what he says, thy labor and thy patience, and how they cannot bear them which are evil, and thou hast tried them which call themselves apostles and are not, and hast found them to be liars. But he says in verse 4, while you done good, your good ain't good enough. I wish I had some help in here. See, many times, beloved, we think just because we do a couple of things around the church, that's good enough. Many times we think just because we give a dime, 50 cents, or even $1 in the church, that's good enough. But verse number 4 says, I got something against you. Do I have any help here? He said, what you got? You have left your first love. Do I have any help here? When I look at the Lord's complaint, it's first of all a personal problem. In other words, the Lord simply says he cares about the children. He cares about the church. He cares about you and I enough to give us another chance. to simply iron out another wrinkle and wipe down one more spot. Do I have any help here? He says to you and I, beloved, he says, if we're going to get from where we are to where God would have us to be, we got to change our ways. Do I have any Bible readers in here that know you can't do what you've been doing? You can't say what you've been saying. You can't go where you've been going. If God has done something in your life, you got to stand up and let the world know whose side you really on. Do I have any help here? The text says his problem with the church. He says, I got something against you. He says, you've left your first love. Do I have any help here? Not only is it a personal problem, but then secondly, watch this, it's a passionate problem. Because when you look at the word love indicates something that is passionate. The word love indicates something that is affectionate. The word love gives indicative information about God says he's willing to go beyond where he ought to go to where he needs to go because he loves you. And I wonder today, do I have any ladies in here that thank God your husband will go beyond where he ought to go to where he needs to go because he loves you? Is there some men in here, thank God you got some women that'll go beyond where they ought to go to where they need to go because they love you? I thank God he don't stop at where he ought to stop, but he goes beyond where he ought to stop. He gives me another chance. I can't help but to tell God, thank you. Come on, y'all, help me preach a little better. Is there 5 of y'all in here got anything to tell God thank you for? Is there 10 of y'all in here who ain't scared to tell God thank you? Is there 15 of y'all in here know God has been good to you, and I'm going to let the world know whose side I'm really on. He uses the word left. In other words, the word left gives indication in study that we push our love away. Are y'all in here with me? See, beloved, God understands who we are. He understands, young people, what you got going on. He understands the pressure that mounts up in our daily way of living. But what God says to us, don't push me away. Are y'all in here with me? What God says to us, don't push me to the side. See, a lot of times, beloved, we want to push him to the side when everything is going on around us we can handle. But time we can't handle it, we want to go find out where he is and see if he can come help us out. But I want to tell you, if you don't push him to the side, he'll always be where you need him to be, right on time. The old church said he may not come when I want him to, but is there anybody in here, thank God, he's always on time. The Lord's complaint at the church at Ephesus is that they left their first love. Do I have any help here? But I'm glad today that even when I fall short, God gives me another chance. Do I have any help here? Am I the only one in friendship today that's fallen short of the glory of God? Am I the only one today in friendship who's pushed the love of God aside? But I can't help but to come back on the 4th Sunday in October and say, Lord, I want to thank you. Because when I didn't know no better, you still kept me. When I didn't know what to do, you still held my hand. When I pushed you away, you still loved me. Even when I didn't love myself. And I just want to tell you thank you. I just want to say much obliged because you've been good to me. Do I have any help here? The Lord's complaint about the first church at Ephesus is that they lost their first love. But the thing I like about the text is that even though God is complaining about them losing their first love, he still gives them a command. Are y'all in here with me? How do you know it's in 5a? Watch the text. He says, remember, therefore, from whence, watch this, thou art fallen. He says, and repent and do the first works, or else I will come unto thee quickly. In other words, even though verse 4 gives indication I've left my first love. Verse 5, the A portion of that 5th verse says, God, he's given me another chance. And I wonder today, do you thank God he's given you one more chance?